So our next speaker, I have to tell you, I've known this real estate broker for years. I'll put it this way, since before a lot of you were born. I try to go to as many classes as he teaches, and I have to tell you, if you're even thinking or considering dabbling, finding out more information about the commercial real estate market, you cannot do anything until you take Tom Dixon's Introduction to Commercial Real Estate. It is by far the best series of programs anywhere in the United States. And we're very fortunate today that we have Tom Dixon himself here, and he's going to do a small snippet of a brand new program that he's just rolled out about negotiating skills. And whether you're residential or commercial, you are going to walk away with some incredible nuggets. Please welcome Tom Dixon. I'm going to pull your presentation up.
Good. Clicker's here?
There you go. All
Great.
right.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to show you a series of slides that are going to emphasize the points that I'm talking about. And you don't really have to take notes, because if you will send me an email, my address is right there, tom@tomdixon.com. I'll be happy to forward to you the presentation so that you can have it to refer to. The idea in negotiations is that you need to think of them as a series of trades. Traditionally, when you present a contract, you would love for the buyer to say, I will present the price at $250,000, and for the seller to say, accepted. However, when a buyer puts up an offer and the seller accepts it immediately, what is your first impression? There's something wrong with it, or I should have asked for more, okay? So you have to understand that in negotiations, it is the more trade-offs, the more your contracts are written with cross-offs and marks and changes, that's good, not bad. Because the more back and forth that you have, the better everybody feels about the transaction. It's difficult because we would love to be able to sell something quickly at an agreed price. But in real estate, it can be very complex to understand the elements that are involved. And I'm going to talk to you about those elements. The first thing is, in negotiation, is to understand the difference between a position and an interest. I've read through about 5 or 6 books on negotiations, and I finally found this gem: position versus interest. The picture that you see is someone raising a window. He's in the library. He's hot. He raises the window to let the air come through. The librarian comes over and she closes the window. They've misunderstood position and interest. The position of the librarian is window closed. The position of the student in the library, window open. But what is their interest? The student wants the window open for the interest of having the air cooling off. The librarian wants the window closed so that there's not a breeze blowing papers around in the library. So they're fighting with each other over an interest because of their position. The reality is the librarian has to say, window closed here, and I'll open the window over there so it doesn't create a breeze. So when you're in negotiations, you need to understand the difference between interests and positions. Let me give you another example. And this leads to what you should do in negotiations also. 2 people have the opportunity to have an orange. 2 people, 1 orange. They both want the orange. Their position is, I want the orange. But as a negotiator, because you've taken this presentation, you talk to the parties and you say, sir, why do you want the orange? I want the orange because I'm a chef and I want the zest on the outside of the orange. Well, why do you want the orange? I have a cold. I want the juice of the orange. So they both can have what they want. One wants the outside and one wants the inside. What is their position? I want the orange. What is their interest after you've discussed it with them is different. And that difference is very important to understand in negotiations. So when you have somebody that's selling something and they say, my price is $300,000, you need to ask the second question, why? How did it come about? Why are you looking for that much money? What is your interest versus just your position? What this does, it changes in the case of the orange from one person wins the orange and the other person loses the orange to win-win. They both got what they want. And as you negotiate between the parties, and when I think about real estate brokers, when you think about it, half of the job is getting somebody convinced to buy the property. The contract is signed perhaps, and then that's when the negotiations begin about the transaction itself. So you're partially a salesman, but also you have to be a negotiator to satisfy these needs. When you are negotiating, you need to set high goals. And when you're making an offer or a presentation, you need to think about the presentation as setting high goals, because those high goals are the way that you can achieve what you're seeking. Of course, higher goals or higher prices can also negate what takes place. And so when you set high goals, you want to think about the ways that your proposal would benefit the other party's interest. For example, you have a transaction in which the buyer wants to have a 180-day inspection period. What? That's crazy. That's too long. But you may be able to understand why they want the longer inspection period, because they've had a bad experience in the past, or there's something unusual about the property. Okay? But once you understand what their needs are, it leads to a better understanding and better negotiations. Oh boy. Time pressure. Wouldn't you love to have somebody buying a piece of real estate that says to you, I have to own the property by July 1st? Yes. I have to relocate my office by the 1st of September. Now, time pressure can work against you if you are somebody that needs a product quickly. But if in fact you are the provider of that time pressure can work to your advantage. There's a great story that during the Vietnam War shows you how time pressure differs from culture to culture, that the North Vietnamese decided that they would go to the Paris peace talks. And the United States went to the Paris peace talks to try to settle the conflict in Vietnam. Now, the North Vietnamese, when they went to Paris, they rented a townhouse for 3 years. The United States, when they went to the Paris peace talks, they rented a place to stay for 2 months. It took them 6 months to decide on the shape of the table. Why? Because the North Vietnamese were not under any pressure, and they knew that the United States was under pressure. So if one party has a time pressure, that party is weaker, and that person or individual that has time is in a much better position. Be aware of time pressure as you negotiate. In negotiations, you want to have an opening price, what you'll find acceptable, and the maximum, or what they call walkaway price. You're in the process of buying a car that's priced at $15,000. Your opening price might be 10, your walkaway is 15, and somewhere in between is a price that you would accept. So you need to think about in negotiations, what are acceptable prices? What is the opening? What's your walkaway? And kind of what's a reasonable number to accept in negotiations? This is important if you're dealing particularly in commercial properties, and that is to have a written, well, it would work for residential also. Somebody's trying to make a decision about buying a residential property. If you have a written report of comparable sales, comparable listings, so that someone can compare these, it's very important in your presentation. The other is to practice a dry run with somebody in your office perhaps and say, this is how I want to negotiate this transaction. What do you think of my approach? And then, of course, you want to search for alternatives. If you are representing a buyer of a house, you want to be able to say to the seller, here are my options that are in competition with the property that you're offering. So it's a matter of doing your homework and preparation so that you can prepare this comparable information. Look for their hot buttons. This lady must have this purse. And you're dealing with a buyer of a house. I must have a house with a pool, with a dock on the bay. That limits what they will look at, but it also means these are extremely important. You're negotiating a commercial lease. The bank says, I will rent, but only if I can put my name on the top of the building. Now that also means that there's a lot of pressure to find that particular property, and perhaps the person that the bank or the buyer is willing to pay more because they must have that particular thing. When you're dealing with a transaction, you need to make sure that the person that you're dealing with, and this seems strange, has the authority to make a decision. I'm trying to find a commercial space for my dentist, and it's just frustrating because I show him the space. Oh, I love it, but I got to show it to my wife. Or you show a property to a office manager. I love the office, but I got to show it to somebody else. So when you're negotiating, you need to ask a question. If, doctor, I show you a space that you might like, how many people are involved in making a decision on that purchase or that lease? And you've trapped them. Because if they say, well, I can make a decision, then if you show it to them, they're committed to make that decision. But if in fact they say, well, I have to show it to somebody else. By the same token, if a presentation is made to you to purchase something or to take an action, you can always say, well, I have to defer to the higher authority. Maybe they don't exist, but that's the idea. So you want to take your negotiations back. Don't be in a position, and this is the reason that you don't generally want to have a buyer and a seller in the same room. Because the buyer may say, I will give you $200,000 or $300,000 for a property. The seller then has to make a commitment or has to say, I will take your offer back to higher authority. So be aware of the impact of higher authority. Now there's a series of terms that I'm going to show you. One is called the flinch. The flinch is, you want how much? I tell the story about my son. He was maybe 8 or 9 years old. He came to me and said, Dad, I went to the gun and knife show and they have a knife that I want to buy and they're asking $8 for it. Can I have $8? I said, no. I'll give you $5. So he goes back to the gun and knife show. He asks the guy, how much do you want for the knife? $8. My son said, $8? The guy said, okay, $5. This works surprisingly well in all transactions. Now, you don't see it necessarily in commercial real estate, but you will see it in other transactions. A gentleman in my office when I was doing this presentation told me a story about he went into Macy's to buy a couch. And the couch was a floor model. And they were asking $600 for it. So he said to the salesperson, "How much is the couch?" And she said, "Well, let me check with the manager." And she came back and she said, "The managers agreed to sell the couch for $450. His expression was, $450 as, "Wow, that's great." What she heard was the flinch. $450? And she said, "I'll throw in shipping. I'll deliver it for free." All because you've learned about a thing called the flinch. That's all it takes. It's surprising to be able to say to somebody, "That's too much. I don't want to pay that much." Now there's another expression, "I would like to, but they won't approve." There is an organization in banks that I'm not even sure exists, and they're called the Loan Committee. You are never turned down for a loan by John Smith. It is the Loan Committee that turned it down, okay? It is those people. I have fought hard to get you that loan, but the Loan Committee won't approve it. So you can always, again, be aware of a gambit or a tactic. I would love to rent you that space and give you all new carpet, but the manager, the owners won't do it. So be aware of this good guy, bad guy. I'm the good guy, they're the bad guy technique. I like this one, the crunch. But that is more than I want to spend. Can't you do better than that? What more can we do? There must be some flexibility in your price, on and on and on. Okay? It is amazing to me that you can go into almost any situation and say, "Is that the best you can do?" And they'll say, "Well, let me see if I can get you a discount." Of course, the game is played on you. You are trying to sell a house, and you try to get the listing, and what's the first question they say? "Well, is that the lowest commission that you can charge?" But these are terms that you'll see in a thing called the crunch and the gambit of the crunch, okay? So we've learned about the cringe. We've learned about the crunch. Too much. What is the response to the crunch? If the crunch is, what can you do? How can you lower it? The response is, well, how much lower do I have to go? You're buying a car and you say it's too much. How much lower can you go? The bogey. My wife actually pulled a bogey and she didn't even know it. She told me she went to an art show to buy a picture. And when she went to buy the picture, it was $20. And she said to the salesman, "Move fast." They're coaching me to move faster. She said to the salesman, "I only have $15. And he took it. And that is the bogey. The test of the bogey, of course, is in a house. I only have $200,000 to buy a house. You can test it by saying, if I found you a house that's much more for a little bit more money, would you be able to come up with the money? Straw issues. Straw issues occur in a contract all the time. The 180-day inspection period. They didn't want a 180 inspection period. They only wanted 40 days or 45 days. But if they asked for more than they wanted, the negotiations can come back the other way. Now, what the hell do you think this is? How could the hairy hand apply to negotiations? Here's what happens, and this would happen to you, and you will be able to apply this idea today. You're a portrait artist. You paint people's portraits. The family looks at it and says, "Oh, the eyes don't sparkle, he's got wrinkles, whatever." So you've learned a technique called the hairy hand. When you paint the portrait, you make the hand real hairy. So when you present the portrait, the person looks at, "Oh my God, look at the hairy hand. I'll take care of it." This applies to real estate. Most of us say when we sell a piece of real estate, we want it to be perfect. I say to you, maybe no. Let something be bad. Kick a hole in the wall. Make something bad, because what happens is that then they concentrate on that ding and they perhaps don't see the other things that are wrong. When you're selling a car, keep a little ding there. Keep a little bit of the hairy hand in a transaction, because then you can say, oh, you're absolutely right. That hole in the wall is terrible. They won't see the carpet's messed up. They won't see the air conditioning doesn't work. They will focus on that thing, so you will remember the hairy hand. I'm moving. Funny money. I'm selling a building. We can't agree on the price by $100,000. $100,000 is a lot of money. So I said to them, if you finance $100,000 over 20 years at 5%, that's a cost of $20 a day. Isn't it worth $20 a day to buy this property that you're really interested in? I'd never pay $100,000. $20 a day they agree to. So break it down into an understandable amount. And then we're getting towards the end. What the hell's this? I had it happen 2 days ago. We agreed to everything. But then the buyer said, wouldn't it be nice if you, the broker, threw in free appliances? What? My son, who took this class, said, Dad, that was just a nibble. A friend of mine selling his fancy $500,000 yacht. They agreed to everything. The buyer says, now that does include a full tank of gas. $6,000 to fill the tank up. That's the nibble. The reason I pointed out to you that in a lot of cultures, the nibble is totally acceptable. It's expected. But when you get hit with a nibble and you haven't taken this class, you'd say, why are they doing this to me? And what you do is you just say, okay, it's a nibble. Actions. First action, have the other side make the first offer is usually a good idea. Start high, you'll win, you'll come out ahead. Don't say yes too soon, because if you do, the person will say, oh boy, I should have asked for less, or there's something wrong. The 3 F's. If you get into a disagreement, remember, feeling, felt, and found. I know that there's a train that runs by this house. I know how you feel about trains running next to the house. I have felt the same thing, and others have too. But what I have found is that people that have bought houses next to the train, after a while, it doesn't bother them. Don't say the train is meaningless. Say, I know how you feel. Others have felt the same way, and this is what I found. And then we get into concessions and movements. And we're moving right along. Interested buyers have reasons to... Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let me tell you.
I felt that same way.
Yeah.
There have been other speakers that have felt the same
way.
thing.
All right.
And they found that the time ran
Yeah.
out.
Okay. Very good. Send me an email, and I'll be happy to send you the whole presentation, and you can look at it again.
Great.